Good morning, everyone, and welcome to online worship here at Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. I am Dayna Edwards, your intern minister, and my pronouns are she and her. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you're joining us from, whatever your beliefs, your gender identity and expression, your immigration status, or life circumstances, we welcome you to worship this morning. Many of us are grieving so many losses in our lives right now. We are making space to honor the many losses that we have all experienced as a community, personally and globally at our 1 p.m. service today. In this service, we will honor those who lost their lives in service of a cause greater than their own. Joanne Jersey, today's pastoral visitor, is on YouTube live chat, and there will be times throughout the service that you can engage with her. You can also email our pastoral care team at pastoralcare@cedarlane.org. We're entering our last week of our What's in My House spiritual practice. This may look familiar to some of you. We have counted things in our houses ranging from beds to blue jeans. We have noticed the places in our lives where we are abundant and where we have abundance. I had no idea that we had 18 light switches in our house. So I invite you to finish with me this week and finish strong and send your total monetary amount collected to Cedar Lane at the end of the week. Newcomers, welcome. You're invited to complete the form that has been linked in the chat. If you feel moved and inspired by our services, we invite you to click share. Click subscribe to get notified when we add new content to our YouTube channel. We'll have instructions near the end of our at the end of our service for our Zoom coffee hour after worship to deepen our connection to each other. Now, I invite you to greet your neighbors in the live chat, and we will return to worship with the hymn, Spirit of Life. We come to this day called by war, by the suffering we inflict and endure. When minds across borders fail to reason and compromise, we come to this day called by loss, the deaths of those who serve in our name, those whose lives end before their natural course, in service to a cause greater than their own. We come to this day called by hope that we will, in some season, finally surrender our swords for plowshares, and we come to this day called by peace. May we hear its song. May we proclaim its promise. May our remembrance today renew our struggle. We can never stay or rest.
Good morning. I am Babzz, and my pronouns are they, them, and I am your worship associate for this service. If you have a chalice at home, you are invited to light yours now. Let us know in the chat where you are by writing, "The chalice is lit in your neighborhood, town, or wherever else you are in the world." I am lighting mine in Strathmore, Bethesda. Please join me in sharing your chalice words on your screen, in honor of those who have given their lives for our freedom, in recognition of the gifts and sacrifices they have made on our behalf, and in our sincere hope that we may be worthy of their memory. We give thanks and light our chalice.
The first stop on U.S. soil after a deployment is the airport. From there, it's all downhill until you get to see your family and your loved ones again. But the airport's its own scene when you're in a soldier's uniform. On my trip home, I'm reminded of the last time I was in the airport, returning from Afghanistan after 2 weeks of R&R, rest and relaxation leave. In my memory, I walk through the crowded Atlanta airport. I'm tired and feeling sorry for myself. I certainly do not want to shake hands and play the happy, grateful soldier one more time. I have to admit that I've become weary of the thank you for your service handshakes. I understand the sentiment and I appreciate the gesture, but sometimes you just really need to get to the bathroom. When I see the group of elementary school students holding signs and clapping, my heart sinks. I need to go. Not to shake hands, but there seems to be no good way to avoid it. They've chosen the only clear path to the restroom to set up the greeting line. I make a wide arc and head for my destination. Then from out of the crowd, a kindly looking older woman in a USO shirt yells to me, "Sir, could you please come and talk to them? Just a few words. It would mean so much." All eyes are suddenly on me. I can't avoid them now. My name is clearly emblazoned on my chest. I can see the headline, "Chaplain Tiger, U.S. Army, runs away from children in display of ingratitude." I turn and walk to them. "Hi guys, where are you from? What are your names? What brings you out today?" I smile, I do my duty. "We just want to say thanks," one student says. "We really appreciate your sacrifice." Frankly, I've never considered my service a sacrifice. I am well paid to do this job and I really love what I do. Two things many people in this world cannot say. Privilege? Yes. Honor? Certainly. But sacrifice just doesn't feel that way to me. Nonetheless, I wade into the crowd of kids and make some of the typical small talk soldiers make in these situations. I share little pieces of information, but never allow anything like a real conversation to develop. I guess there are some things that only other soldiers will understand. The real sacrifices, the sorrow, the fear, the loneliness, the questions that will remain forever unanswered. These are not things we share in airports. As I talk with the kids, I give my usual, "I'm just a soldier" speech. I've recited it to many strangers in airports. I tell them how much it means for them to come out and thank us and how important it is for us to hear that they appreciate our sacrifice. I look at their faces as they gather in close, shake my hand, and ask their questions with wide-eyed curiosity. That is when something strange happens. I begin to feel my voice crack, a lump forms in my throat, my eyes feel strangely wet. The words become difficult to get out of my mouth. I really need to get myself out of there fast before I break down. Well, thanks, guys. I really gotta go, are the only words I manage to squeak out as I turn and walk away. Something about that encounter gets to me. Maybe it's that those kids remind me of my own. Maybe it's the genuineness of their appreciation or the way they seem to look up at me just because I wear a uniform. There's nothing special about me. I'm a guy lucky enough to wear a uniform and do a job I love. But for a moment, a fleeting moment, I feel truly appreciated for what I do in a more genuine way than I've ever felt before. That appreciation means something to me. As I walk out of the bathroom, I think of all the big geopolitical issues I heard on the news at home. I think of the political pundits making ill-informed judgments about the value of the mission, the chances of success, and even the ultimate meaning of soldiers' sacrifices, like they could really know such things. Looking in those kids' eyes, all those questions vanished as I recognized a simple truth. What we do matters. Whatever historians may write or pundits may pontificate, what we do matters because we stand for more than any single mission, geopolitical strategy, or political goal. Honor, devotion, loyalty, friendship, and yes, sacrifice have meaning and value far beyond what any TV talking head or politician may say in the moment. I think it was these values, which we have all in some way dedicated our lives to, that I saw in those kids' eyes, and that nearly brought me to tears. Not an easy thing to do. Now, as I walk through an airport in uniform and I'm greeted with "thank you for your service," I can read more into what's being said. Maybe the uniform we wear reminds people that the sacrifices we make every day will bear on the rest of our lives. We make not for ourselves and not for them, but for something greater than any of us may ever truly know or understand. Maybe they're saying, thank you for reminding us that despite all the BS and confusion of life, there remain some truths that are truly worth fighting for. As we mourn and honor those we've lost, may we also honor those who are serving and those who have not returned.
Each Sunday, we take up an offering to support the mission and ministry of Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church. Our offering is an invitation to demonstrate willingly a commitment to the common principles and convictions expressed in our Unitarian Universalist faith. Our offering reminds us that our congregation belongs to us, to each of us individually, as well as to the whole of us. It reminds us that our ministry is more than just the building. It is an extension of our gratitude for our spiritual home, where we are welcome to be who we are, as we are, and to bless each other and the world with our gifts. Today, we share our offering with Bethesda Cares, a community outreach program for the houseless in Montgomery County. Their mission is quite simple: to prevent, ease, and end homelessness in our community. Their clients are the county's working poor, often single heads of households working multiple jobs, or elderly people on fixed incomes, or veterans who are struggling and suffering on our streets. Let's watch this moving video to learn more about their work.
At Bethesda Cares, our mission is to prevent and end homelessness in Montgomery County, Maryland. Since the start of COVID-19, our operations related to prevention activities, homeless prevention activities, meal programs being served, and supportive housing have all had to adapt and improvise to meet the moment to raise the level of care for people experiencing homelessness. A particular challenge is our street outreach program. Many of our folks who are homeless on the street, we are transitioning into hotel placements and further into permanent housing locations. Our street outreach workers are on the street almost every day, engaging people who are still out there homeless without a place to live. A lot of times those folks are vulnerable in many ways. Our street outreach workers are going and visiting those people on a constant basis, asking those folks if maybe they have a fever or if they have any kinds of symptoms or if there's anything visually that we can see. It's important that we check on these people because they don't have a place to live. They don't have a place to go to stay safe. To practice proper social distancing, you need your own home and a place to stay home. And these individuals who are homeless don't really have that. It's especially challenging when they're in public. A lot of times people just don't want to go to an overflow shelter or a congregate living space where there are more than 10 people sometimes staying in a facility. All right, so we're with Lydia this morning and Gabe and on street outreach here in Montgomery County, Maryland. So Lydia, tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Hey guys, so we're out this morning. We're checking on a few unsheltered clients that we have out here. We're checking on them, seeing if they have any symptoms, seeing if they're struggling with getting any supplies they need out here, seeing if they're updated on the situation, what's going on in the state right now because of COVID. We're handing out supplies like face masks, hand sanitizers, socks, clothing, anything that they need really.
Hey, Gabe's stripping off some PPE. You may have to take the mask off so we can hear you.
Yes, we are using the mask, all the PPE to be protected, and then going to the street to talk to the clients and try to keep them safe and give them some snacks, some gloves, mask for them to be safe on the street.
Thanks, guys, for all your work this morning. We truly appreciate the partnerships and the support that we receive from the faith community throughout Montgomery County, Maryland. It's vital that our services continue to work to place people into housing. Housing is healthcare is a big motto at Bethesda Cares, and we firmly believe that during the COVID-19 pandemic, people experiencing homelessness need a place to be home and to stay safe, and our staff are working very hard to make sure that that happens.
We who have been blessed with our lives may also choose to live lives of gratitude by sharing the responsibility for this, our common house of spirit, and for the well-being of others less fortunate. You can give by electronic means of the modern era to our offering plate, by text, online giving, PayPal, QR code, or by the ancient spiritual practice of mailing a check to the church at 9601 Cedar Lane, Bethesda, Maryland, 20814. As Jane Moore shares a special song, the online offering to support Bethesda Cares and Cedar Lane will now be joyfully given and gratefully received. Thank you for your generosity and support.
When the night is long and lonely, and I'm full of worry and fear, there's a song that I remember. I sing along and it brings you near, holding on to you from a distance. May the angels circle around from a distance. With every breath I breathe, with every beat of my heart, with every song that I sing, we will not be apart. Getting through unknowns and sorrow, taking one day at a time. Know that you are my hero, cherished friend of mine, holding on to you from a distance. Holding on to you from a distance.
This Memorial Day weekend, we remember all who died in our wars. Wars not of their making, but whose lives were consumed by them. Our roll call reminds us that these are not nameless people who serve.
We remember 625,000 who died in the Civil War, 116,516 in World War I, 406,000 in World War II, 54,246 in the Korean War.
We remember the 58,220 who died in the Vietnam War, 1,562 in the First Iraq War, 2,445 in Afghanistan, 4,602 in Iraq and the Middle East.
We remember the thousands of service members who died by suicide after leaving the armed forces.
We remember the 28 U.S. service members killed since May 2019. Sergeant James G. Johnston, Master Sergeant Michael B. Riley, Sergeant First Class Elliot J. Robbins, Sergeant Major James Ryan Sartor, Specialist Michael Isaiah Nance, Private First Class Brando J. Kerisher, Master Sergeant Luis De Leon Figueroa.
Master Sergeant Jose Gonzalez, Sergeant First Class Dustin Ard, Sergeant First Class Elis Barreto Ortiz, Sergeant First Class Jeremy Griffin, Chief Warrant Officer Second Class Kirk Fuchigami Jr., Chief Warrant Officer Second Class David Nadal, Sergeant First Class Michael Goebel.
Sergeant Edward William Fries, Gunnery Sergeant Scott Koppenhafer, Specialist James Clayton Horn, Sergeant Nathaniel Irish, Specialist Antonio Moore, Captain Moises Navas, Gunnery Sergeant Diego Pongo.
Staff Sergeant Ian McLaughlin, Private First Class Miguel Villalon, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Vos, Captain Ryan Faneff, Sergeant First Class Javier Gutierrez, Sergeant First Class Antonio Rodriguez, Specialist Brandon Kimball.
We invite you to share the names of your beloved ones in the chat. Fallen comrades, grandparents, parents, children, siblings, spouses and partners, mentors, and friends. We lift up their names that we have not forgotten them, and in honor of their service and their sacrifice.
And to all those here remembering, may life bless us in our going out and our coming in our grief and in our joy, in our remembering and in our forgetting.
And may we live while we are alive, for life is brief in its days, and even though thus shadowed with loss, life can also be beautiful. Would you join me now in the spirit of prayer or reflection? Nameless one of many names, Spirit of life and love, we enter into this season of Memorial Day surrounded by such a cloud of witnesses. We remember, first of all, the people who are currently serving in the armed forces, and we pray for their safe return. We also acknowledge that there are people who will not return as we grieve their passing. We pause to honor their sacrifice and their service. We also pause this hour to give thanks for all those who have served in the nation's armed services. Those who have not served cannot fully imagine or understand the experience of war, but we do know war's aftermath and the toll that it can take on the human heart. This day also remembers and acknowledges loss, and so we remember those whom we have loved and lost in our family, in our congregation, in our community, and in our nation. We hold their names and their faces in our mind's eye. We recall the gifts they gave to us through the strength of their being, the depth of their love, the courage of their dying, and the fullness of their living. In the holy quiet of this hour, their names surround us, and they live with us in blessed memory. May we rise and remain together in silence as a tribute to all that they have meant to us. Let us enter the silence together. May we be held by the love that will not let us go as we hold and remember what we have lost. In the name of all that is holy, life-affirming, and life-sustaining, let us say, Shalom, Salam, Om Shanti, Amen, blessed be.
The man who plays the final song for the and the sound of honor. The man who plays the final song for the fallen at Arlington National Cemetery.
From ABC News, this is World News Tonight Sunday with Elizabeth Vargas reporting tonight from New York.
There was an Easter sunrise Easter ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery today. More than 250,000 people, including veterans from all the nation's wars, are buried at Arlington. There's now a growing number from the war in Iraq added. ABC's Keith Garvin spent time with a man whose contribution can be heard during the final honors.
It's a song that for more than a century has spoken hauntingly of pain, honor, and sacrifice. Perhaps no one knows taps better than Sergeant Major Henry Sgrecci, the premier bugler at Arlington National Cemetery. All winter and into the spring, the war in Iraq has given him too many opportunities to play it.
It's always an honor. It's never been less than that.
On this day, the Sergeant Major prepares for yet another funeral. The shoes and the uniform must look just right. His bugle must be warmed up and ready.
Taps is known throughout the world. Nobody wants to hear it other than in the way it is in their minds, which is perfect.
For every funeral, Sgrecci plays the same 24 notes. Although each ceremony brings its own range of emotions, the 27-year veteran has to keep his under control. As he found at a recent funeral, that task is sometimes difficult.
There was a young family there, and that just tears at your heart to see that. But I see it every day. So, and I can't let that impede my work because I'm here to play taps, to extend that honor, that final honor to that fallen comrade.
Sergeant Major Sgrecci refers to taps as a musical prayer, a prayer that says,
"Thank you for your service. God bless you."
Keith Garvin, ABC News, Arlington National Cemetery.
And that is our report on World News Tonight this Sunday. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. For all of us at ABC News, good night.
In the rising of the sun and in its going down,
we remember them.
In the blowing of the wind and in the chills of winter, we remember them. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring,
we remember them.
In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn,
we remember them.
In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength,
we remember them.
When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys, we yearn to share.
We remember them.
So long as they live, we too shall live, for they are now a part of us.
As we remember them.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for patriarchy that sees beyond the years, thy alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea, from sea to shining sea to shining sea.
Wow. Thank you, members of the Cedar Lane Choir, for singing that beautiful song. And Kevin Miller, thank you so much for all the time and effort you put in to making it happen. Every time I hear that song, I think about the vast and beautiful landscape of our country and everything that we have to offer. I think sometimes that even between the words, I can hear the bells that promise freedom ringing, calling me to answer and bring forth the very best of what America has to offer. According to a Library of Congress article, it was at the top of Pikes Peak in Colorado in 1893 that Catherine Lee Bates, a professor of English literature at Wellesley College, was overcome with awe by the view. Her awe turned to art as she penned the poem that later became the song America the Beautiful. And our country is beautiful, isn't it? The vast landscapes, the rich and abundant natural resources, the ideals that we are set upon that promise freedom for all. When I put on my uniform, that's the America that I'm thinking of, the ideal of America. Chaplain Tiger, my father, my uncles, that is the America that they served and are serving. Those who sacrificed their lives for this country have done so not for politicians or pundits, but for the America that promises freedom for all. Catherine Lee Bates's poem was later altered to be the words we hear today, but she began her original ode to America with this verse. Oh, beautiful for halcyon skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the enameled plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, till souls wax fair as earth and air and music hearted sea. Can you feel the pulse of deep love and awe for the beauty of this country in that verse, the pride
It's like the bells of freedom are ringing in this song, and they are calling us to not just live into, but love into the best that our country is meant to be. There's a story in my family about one of my mom's little sisters and her declaration of love for our country. They say she was about 4 years old and she was watching a show about America. And I'll tell you, Lore isn't quite specific about if it was Memorial Day or 4th of July, but there she was, her little body perched in front of the TV set in the small house that they lived in New York with my mother's siblings, parents, and grandparents as she listened to all the great things about America. There may have been fireworks, we're not sure, but there was definitely powerful prose and song. And at some point, she jumped up and announced, "Yo quiero vivir en America," which translates to, "I want to live in America." Sometimes we hear this story as a wistful retelling of her adorableness and lack of understanding that she was sitting in a room in New York, which of course is indeed in America. But I'm also mindful that the America of her experience, of my family's experience, was not the same as it was for the people that created that program, which had her heart and her attention. Her America included her sweet father, my grandfather, carrying a bat in his car in case the police pulled him over. Her America included living in close quarters with lots of family and a father who used a more Americanized, meaning white, name when he conducted his businesses so he would have more opportunity. In his poem, America, Let America Be America Again, Langston Hughes speaks to this beautiful, flawed, and unequal America. Let America be America again, he says. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plains seeking a home where he himself was free. America was never America for me. America is not a place of freedom for all, and yet the bells of freedom still are ringing, calling us to something more. Can you hear them? What are they calling you to become in these times? And how will our saving faith, which is rooted in both interconnectedness and individual worthiness, hold you and guide you as you answer that call? Bates's poem continues with, "Oh, beautiful were pilgrim feet, whose stern impassioned stress a thoroughfare for freedom beat across the wilderness. America, America, God mend thine every flaw. Confirm thy soul in self-control, thy liberty in law." I love that even a poet enraptured by the beauty and the promise of our country paused to say, "Whoa, God, help us out here and mend our flaws. Help us have some self-control and confirm liberty for all with our laws which continue today to be inequitable, to favor the few over the many, laws which are made by primarily white, wealthy men who plunder resources without cause, and laws that continue to support the thriving of that cohort over poor people and people of color. Yet the bells of freedom are ringing. How will we, as people of faith, answer that call? I had the pleasure of hearing Sylvester Johnson, Virginia Tech's professor of African American religious history, speak when he was at Northwestern, and he lifted up that America's notion of freedom is in need of redefining. When we seek freedom of the individual, it leads to the oppression of others. Johnson asserted instead that there is no freedom from each other. We cannot escape our mutuality, nor should we seek to. Reverend Abhi mentioned something this week that I truly agree with. As Unitarian Universalists, we sometimes get stuck like our country, on individual worth, and we don't make it to our seventh principle, interconnectedness. The practice of our faith is as much in need of redefining as the practice of freedom in America. When the bells of freedom ring and call for us, we have a choice, and we can choose to center interconnectedness as we seek freedom from all. Our deep responsibility to love and care for each other and the planet can be our focus instead of individualism and self-gratification. Breathe with me. Let us return to the words of Langston Hughes. Oh yes, I say it plain, America was never America to me. And yet I swear this oath, America will be. Out of the wreck and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot and of graft and stealth and lies, we the people must redeem the land, the mine, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and the endless plain, and all the stretch of these great states, and make America, America again. I ask you, can you hear the bells? The bells of freedom are ringing. How are they calling you to serve its highest promises? How are they calling you to be in community? At this crucial time when life is interrupted for some and has ended for many, especially poor people and people of color, we have an opportunity to rebuild a society more cognizant and committed to mutuality than individuality. Are you ready? Are you ready to build that America, to choose freedom for all over freedom for one? The bells of freedom are ringing.
Hallelujah.
Thank you, Cedar Lane Quartet and Jasmin, for that powerful rendition of the battle hymn. I want to also thank Harvey Lerner, who gave us this idea of creating a service for Memorial Day weekend that would join the Battle Hymn of the Republic, America the Beautiful, and TAPS. And so this has been a wonderful opportunity for us to collaborate and create this service. Now, the Battle Hymn of the Republic was written by poet, abolitionist, suffragist, and Unitarian foremother Julia Ward Howe in November 1861, when she, her husband Samuel Gridley Howe, who was serving on the Sanitary Commission during the Civil War, and her minister, the Reverend James Freeman Clark, joined a party inspecting the condition of Union troops in Virginia. Now, on the carriage ride back to DC, to overcome the tedium, Howe and others started singing Army songs, including John Brown's Body, a song not about the anti-slavery radical John Brown who attacked Harper's Ferry, but about a diminutive Scotsman in the Union Army with the same name. Now, Reverend Clark, being a good Unitarian minister, loved the melody, but found the lyrics to be crass and insipid. You know, Unitarian Universalists, we tend to read ahead to see if we agree with hymns or not. Anyway, he charged Howe to come up with different words that would be more uplifting. So Howe woke up early next morning and wrote down 6 stanzas of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. The title was given by James Fields, who was the editor of Atlantic Monthly when he published the poem. The genius of Howe's apocalyptic poem is the blend of righteously violent images out of the Hebrew Bible, like bloody justice, which provided an effective rationale and motivation for the war effort, combined with a biblical vision of Christ-like transfiguration, whereby deaths would give birth to a new society, a society without the stain of slavery. The Battle Hymn paints a vivid portrait of sacred violence and captures how Americans fight wars inspired by idealism, wrath, and religious zeal. It portrays the US as a divine vessel guided by God, and war as a divinely ordained mission to protect and spread liberty around the world with an avenging sword. A holy war to spread democratic peace. But as Dominic Tierney, a political science professor at Swarthmore College and author of How We Fight, Crusades, Quagmires, and the American Way of War points out, there is a shadow side to the hymn and the American way of war. He writes, the righteous zeal of America's war effort can excuse almost any sins, like killing hundreds of thousands of enemy civilians. When Americans lose the fateful lightning, they have no moral guilt, for they are the tools of God. He continues, the battle hymn is America. Its words are carved into the narrative arc of the American story. Nowhere is this truer than in wartime. The heat of idealism and wrath forges how we fight, inspiring our better angels and condoning our gravest acts. End of quote. Less than a decade after the battle hymn, appalled and revolted by the carnage of the Civil War and the impending Franco-Prussian War, Julia Ward Howe in 1870 penned an astounding statement that challenged the glorification of war and in many ways was the antithesis of the battle hymn, the Mother's Day of Peace proclamation that I referenced a couple of weeks ago in my Mother's Day reflection. It reads in part, arise, women, say firmly we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm the sword of murder is not the balance of justice. The sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Quite a dramatic shift from the battle hymn where his truth is marching on with a terrible, swift sword. Now, how Julia Ward Howe journeyed from the battle hymn to the peace proclamation is the stuff of biography. The short version is that she defied her husband, who was domineering and abusive, studying extensively and engaging with some of the great thinkers of the day, especially those radical transcendentalists that she hung out with, to deepen her commitment to peace activism for the rest of her life. Howe believed fervently that the work of the divine, which is within, among, and beyond all of us, is our work, yours and mine, perhaps complete someday, but totally in our hands. She was intent upon listening to her own still small voice within, guided by her Unitarian faith to be engaged in the work of peace, equity, and justice. So, on this Memorial Day weekend, I hold both messages of the battle hymn and the peace proclamation as we struggle to live lives of value, of meaning, and of use in the midst of a global pandemic. Grief-stricken by the ever-growing number of deaths that are nearing 100,000 people in the US since March, and over 343,000 people around the world, just the recorded ones from the virus. And dismayed by the conspicuous absence of any collective mourning, the seeming lack of understanding that these staggering losses are not mere numbers on some report from Johns Hopkins, but people who lived and loved and struggled and celebrated. That these losses are our losses, belonging to us all. So as we prepare to observe and mark Memorial Day, a day of remembrance for the war dead, it is good to take some time to reflect on the terrible costs of militarism, war, and the business of war, the slaughter and profiteering that continue in our name, even in the midst of a pandemic. It is good to remember that we are conditioned to remember and tell only part of the story about war, where we tend to see dead civilians and destroyed societies as collateral damage instead of seeing dead human beings, members of the human family, and devastated societies. It is also good to ask ourselves what we, the living, owe the dead, all the dead. Especially this Memorial Day, when we remember not only those who died from bullets, bombs, self-death, and moral injury, but all those who died and are dying in this pandemic, dead in the name of protecting those of us who go on living. What do we owe them? What do we owe the ones who died, the others who will die before all this is over? What might we imagine as redress to a generation of people, family, friends, neighbors, strangers, many of them women and people of color, common everyday heroes who are risking their lives every day for no purpose but to see the light of another day and help others do the same? What do we owe them? It is good to remind ourselves that we owe them not just our remembrance and our gratitude, but also a responsibility to care for those who are still living. It is a responsibility that calls us to reject the toxic individualism of those who insist that public health rules infringe on their liberty, or because so far the people most likely to die have been the elderly or communities of color, that they are not in those categories, and therefore they don't have to practice those things. It is a responsibility that calls us, in the words of Bishop William Barber, to remind the nation that America cannot go back to normal, that we must stay in place, stay alive, organize, resist, and build power to demand that everyone has the right to live during this pandemic and beyond. We owe the dead a relentless insistence on accountability from those who are charged with the responsibility of upholding life, liberty, and happiness for all people and not just the privileged few. All of the dead deserve our remembrance and our honor. And my dog Beam agrees. Because fundamentally, the question of what we owe to all our dead has to do with how we remember and how we let the memory deepen the integrity of our living. Both by memory and by the way we bring conscious will and attention to how we live our lives, we acknowledge that the dead are still with us. We must remember. We will remember. Let me close with these words of prayer from the Reverend Barbara Peskin. Spirit of life, whom we have called by many names in thanksgiving and in anguish, bless the poets and those who mourn. Give us courage to answer the cry of humanity's pain, and with our bare hands, out of full hearts, with all our intelligence, let us create the peace. Free to grieve, free to remember, free to be teary if that's what flows, free to smile if that's what flows. Let the names of these people with whom we are in relationships of comfort or concern flow in our hearts. Let them flow as we recognize that our freedom is bound up with all the other freedoms that exist and flow like graceful streams through our day-to-day lives. Free us to live, not alone, but in a communion of forgiveness, and free us never to so much relive as to live. Grace, amaze us ever with yourself. Where we feel wretched, lost, or sad, fill us with the music that reminds us that we live not alone, but in harmony with all that is. May it be so. Amen. Let us now join Kevin Miller and Jasmin Lee in singing This Is My Song. Before our benediction, I'd like to thank everyone who helped make today's service possible. My colleague, Reverend Katie Romano Griffin, Dayna Edwards, Babzz Ricketts, Drs. Henry Sgrecci and Jasmin Lee, Jenny Lee Moyer, Rachel Moore, Kevin Miller, members of the Cedar Lane Choir, and Jane Moore. And thank you to all the members of our amazing AV team, Barb Thompson, Mike Morse, Todd Chernikoff, Michael McCrickard, and Rebecca Nachtrieb and Don Woodruff for creating those beautiful in-gathering and service slides. And thank you to our membership coordinator, Roger Santo Domingo, and Joanne Jersey, our pastoral volunteer, who have been active throughout the service in the live chat. We'd love to have you join us for a virtual coffee hour and hang out, have coffee and chat, and stay in touch. The URL for the virtual coffee hour will be in the YouTube chat and on your screen after the closing words. Also, this Sunday, being Memorial Day weekend, we are going to be having a special memory wall dedication ceremony at 1 o'clock. And the YouTube live streams link will be in the chat as well as on screen during our benediction. And now for these words from the Reverend Amy Petrie Shaw. I invite you after each line to say or to include in the chat, we lift up our hearts. For all who die in war, we lift up our hearts. For all who live in suffering in the aftermath of violence, we lift up our hearts. For all who give their lives in smoke and flame, we lift up our hearts. For all who go on in honor of the dead, we lift up our hearts. For all who have served, we lift up our hearts. For a planet that will find peace, we lift up our hearts. For the young and the innocent, we lift up our hearts. For the weary and war-torn, we lift up our hearts. For those who would pray, we lift up our hearts. For those too angry to cry, we lift up our hearts. For all of us, for the many names of God, we lift up our hearts. We lift up our hearts. Peace, salam, shalom, pax, Haiwa, Om Shanti, Amen.
Gonna keep on moving forward. Gonna keep on moving proudly. Keep on moving proudly. Keep on moving proudly. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on singing loudly. Keep on singing. Gonna keep on loving boldly. Keep on loving boldly. Keep on loving boldly. Never turning back. Never turning back. Gonna keep on holding freedom. Keep on holding gonna keep on moving forward.